Hello, Sapila. I just want to with one thought. Yes, this trio of SAP global executives had about as many people as I have in the first two rows. So no matter what I say, I've still had a fantastic afternoon. Fantastic to be here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. Before I get into some thoughts about artificial intelligence, I remember I had a privileged upbringing. I had a home computer when I was 12. Can't tell you quite how long ago that was. But I remember my dad telling me, this computer is really stupid. Right? Computers are really stupid. They will only do what you tell them. Okay. So I've always kind of carried that with me. And today I have the opportunity to talk to you about the power of human intelligence and artificial intelligence. And for me, this is an absolutely amazing thing that today, when we look at a computer, it's very hard to tell that it is still so stupid as it was all those years ago when I touched the first one. I'm Peter Blignaut. I lead the business technology platform team for SAP in Africa. And we'll spend about the next 35 minutes talking about this. We'll leave some time for questions. We did start 5 minutes late, so maybe I'll try and do this in half an hour. And I guess these are really small words for the guys at the back. So perhaps I'll tell you what it says. And I see some guys my age at the back, so it could be quite tough for them. So the first thing I thought we should talk about, we've heard about artificial intelligence. I think in every keynote, recommend a keynote after this. I'm just going to talk about artificial intelligence. His talk is far more inspirational than he's talking about the big picture world, all the fantastic stuff that you can do. Mine's a little bit more practical. But the first thing I thought we should talk about is why artificial intelligence needs people. And this comes back really to the idea that my dad had. I'll tell you, it was actually 41 years ago that I first touched a computer. In that the computer does nothing without an instruction, right? So it needs a developer. In the world of artificial intelligence, we often call those developers, the people who write the software, we call those people data scientists. But these are still the people that we need to tell the computer what to do. I mean, it's a fairly basic thing. But if you don't have such a person, you're actually not starting at all with artificial intelligence. And then the second piece, and that's the bit that I hope to spend a bit of time on this afternoon, is that we need people thinking about what the computer is going to do. And that's the governance piece, right? That's the piece that I actually think, if we get the governance right, artificial intelligence has enormous benefits for us as people. And then, of course, never to forget, the most commonly talked about piece of artificial intelligence today is what we call machine learning, where the computer learns from people. And the thing that I often think we should actually have called this thing is people teaching, right? Because machines don't learn from other machines. People teach them. And for so many of you SAP customers, SAP partners, probably one of the richest data sets that we can feed into a machine to teach it something is the one that's been created on your SAP ERP system over the last 5, 10, 20, 40, there are some 40 SAP installations in this country, 40 years that people have fed data into that system, and the machine can learn from that. So you have an amazing opportunity to use that data. But having said that, why would we as people want all of this AI, right? I mean, I think it's kind of cool, ChatGPT, all these things. Why would we want it? What is it that we're trying to get out of artificial intelligence? Because if we don't need it, why are we building it into every system? And I'll come to that in a minute, because we are. And the fundamental piece of thinking about why we want artificial intelligence is to make us more efficient, to give us more time to do things. And the first thing I always feel is, particularly post-COVID, I don't know who has this experience of post-COVID work days that are 10 or 12 hours. I don't know. I think if you have, you can put your hand up, but I think you all have it, right? I think we're all working these insane hours. If we could do a little bit more with the computer, and we could use that computer to do some of the repetitive tasks, which we've taught them to do, we'll get some of that time back. will become more efficient. And that'll help us. And possibly the aspiration I have, and it's actually not a new aspiration, is simply to work less. And I love this thing. Writing in 1930, John Maynard Keynes is an economist. If you like economics, you can tell me whether you like him or not. But writing in 1930, he predicted that people would have a 15-hour work week. But the interesting piece of this 15-hour work week, if you actually go and read the article, he didn't predict that we would have to work 15 hours a week. What he actually predicted was people will opt in to work 15 hours a week. Otherwise, they'll get bored, right? And they'll behave badly. So his actual thinking was that automation, and this is before computers, the way that we understand them, right? But he saw the growth in productivity. And we saw that picture this morning, the growth in productivity where you had this linear growth for 1,800 years, and then all of a sudden it ramps up, and the GDP of the world explodes over the last 2 centuries. So perhaps that should be our aspiration, right? If we're going to put in these artificial intelligence systems, we shouldn't be doing it just to make ourselves more efficient and to make money, but actually to make ourselves more effective and maybe make ourselves into more effective humans. So what are we going to look at? I'm already over time. It's kind of my way of presenting. I want to spend just a couple of brief moments about where artificial intelligence kind of started, right? So I'm going to use a very simplified slide because I love the history, but I think there's too much theory, right? And then I want to spend quite a lot of time on governance and ethics. How do we actually get these systems in? How do we make sure that they do what we want? And then I've got 3 examples that I've pulled out. Hopefully they're relevant to some of you in the audience. Certainly, hopefully they'll spark some ideas. I pulled these out of a big catalog, which is way too much for my allocated time. And then if there's time, I wanted to close with some ideas and maybe some interaction around whether artificial intelligence and machine learning in particular is something that's practical for us in Africa. Because I think many of our organizations are trying this, but I don't know if we're seeing the success stories that we'd hoped to. So with those ideas in mind, some thoughts on what is artificial intelligence or the evolution of artificial intelligence and how that's worked. If you get thirsty, there's water on the sides of the room, by the way. It's not just for me. So very much, we started automating statistical processing in the 70s. Before that, computers were really expensive. You could hardly find a processing slot. You couldn't do anything. I'm not that old, by the way, but that's what my dad told me. So before that, you couldn't get the processing to run any real statistics. But from the 70s, as the processing became available, we started putting basic statistical algorithms into computers. And those algorithms are out there today, and they do many things that we almost take for granted, that are part of our daily lives. But the kind of examples of these things are statistical process control. So we run the stats. We know that what we've produced in the batch is up to standard. More recently, we try to change that around from, say, statistics into predictive analytics. So starting in the 80s, really the 2000s, predictive is a very popular topic for people to talk about and to try to implement. What we tried to do is predict how people behave. And the kind of thing that we did there, the classic example of this is the Netflix recommendation, right? We all know this. Netflix, you should next. And it's kind of terrifying because sometimes they get it spot on. Like there's 3,000 things in the catalog and that I want. But that's really predictive analytics. And what it does has become so ingrained in how we think about the world today that we sometimes forget it's essentially a bunch of statistical algorithms that are too complicated for people to run. And the computer's taken over running them for us. But it really clusters us into similar kinds of people in terms of our habits of watching Netflix or what it is that we do. And then it goes and looks and it says, well, that's the most likely thing. I predict that this is what you would like to do. Really, really powerful, and I think many use cases that are not explored yet. But of course, the world of technology, we heard it in every keynote this morning, moves at an incredible pace. And The next thing is here before we fully understood what we had, and the next thing is generative AI. So what we're looking here is the ChatGPT world, right? We feed a massive amount of data, and I think we often don't understand how much data got fed into ChatGPT and how long it took them to do it before it was ready for general use. But we feed in these really vast volumes of data, and as a consequence, we teach the computer to do something that we have thought was impossible, right? I mean, I think, who's tried ChatGPT? Can I just get put it? Wow. Okay, there we go. We heard about the million users, right? If you haven't tried it, by the way, yeah, I used my wife's login to try, because I wanted to try the question of whether it would teach me how to make a bomb from diesel and fertilizer. Didn't want to do that on my own profile, so I used my wife. It will not, quite clever actually, it will not, even if I create a fictional scenario where I have to rescue children from a cave and they will die unless there's an explosion, it will not teach me how to make a bomb. I can Google it though. That still works, but it would not reveal this to me. But the generative AI thing, I think, takes us to another level, and yet I think my dad's advice that computers are stupid kind of remains the same thing. And maybe I'll touch on this now. There was another slide where I wanted to talk about it, but my timing is always terrible. The power of generative AI is just amazing. We've seen these things, images that look like art, essays that look like they were written by people who achieved standards that we could never achieve. But there are some dangers with it too. There's been some stuff in the press which I think has been so interesting. Lawyers who've submitted the thing into ChatGPT got a well-reasoned argument back, unfortunately based on absolutely invented material, right? Based on stuff never part of the law. And I'll touch on that in one of my use cases, because I think while there's an opportunity for us to use it, we should really think about where we are using it and where it's maybe better for us to still do the work. That machine needs a lot of teaching from humans. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was governance and ethics. How many people have actually thought about governance and ethics in AI? Have you ever sat down and thought about it? There we go, some people. Put your hands up. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, but I tended to regard it as somewhat of an abstract problem, right? Something that somebody else does. Some guy goes out, inside SAP, we have a committee who deal with this thing, and I'll present some of their stuff in a minute. There's some really useful things in there. But I tend to think of it as an abstract problem. And earlier this year, my daughter joined an SAP partner. She got the job because she knew what Fiori was, not because she's related to me. But then, if you don't know what Fiori is, come to talk to me after. We got a problem, right? If your kids don't know, okay, we can work on that. But one of the first jobs they gave her, and I thought it was a fantastic piece of innovation. The customer might be in the room. I don't see them, but they are at the conference. So what they wanted was to take an AI algorithm and use it to identify the profile picture that people were putting of themselves on SuccessFactors. Okay, so I think actually this is super cool, because generally, I mean, in most companies, you get like really poor profile pictures. You know, some guys have like a picture of their dog, and the next guy has a little emoji, and they wanted to recognize, is this picture somebody's face? And can we use that picture as a proper picture for HR on our system? Super use case. And she and some of the other people on the team that got together, I'm amazed by young people. They had this thing working in like 48 hours. Right? So I was like, wow, that's awesome. Absolutely amazing use case. If you want to implement this for your own company, I can take you to the partner. They're also here. Just a plug for them. But she took it another step. So she said, okay, let's test it. So she fed a bunch of images into the thing. Okay. And what they found was really well for just about everybody, except for people with afros. Right? Now that's so they were able to fix that, right, through a simple mechanism, which in our governance is called human in the loop, right? So they were able to fix that by just saying, well, if it doesn't work, just route it to a person. Simple as that, right? But I really thought, like, this took AI governance from the abstract for me to something that actually is something that we need to be thinking about. It's not something that we can actually go and put these use cases in and think, okay, super, we've moved our company forwards or our organization forwards. So that took it really for me to a different level. But with that in mind, I thought, I've got to put up a plug for somebody global from SAP too. I really like this statement from Thomas. Thomas Sarsig is the guy who runs development of the application software. He's the boss of the guys who build S4HANA, right? And I thought this was really powerful. In particular, having somebody at the level of the management board, setting the policy for SAP, saying, by integrating AI into our solutions, we aim to provide unbiased and sustainable support to people. That's wonderful. That's actually where I started. I only found the quote after I wrote my introduction, so I didn't copy it from him. But I think absolutely, really the right sort of thinking. So SAP thought about this for some time, and I thought we'll share some of our ideas around what we've thought. And if you like them, maybe you can go and find this. We've put this publicly on the internet. Because we think it's important that people should engage with it. Go to sap.com and look for AI. It's much bigger, and it'll be much bigger, right? So the first thing we thought about here is that there's definite need to retain human agency. People should really be making the decisions, right? We don't want the machine to make a decision without a person understanding how that decision was made and making sure that it was made in a way that makes sense for people. So we get into some really technical things around this about, what is it that you want the person to do and what is it that you want the machine to do. But I think you can kind of, some of these things are actually quite logical when you take them out of the technical language and you put them into human language. So I like the first one. In our policy, it says the target definition of the AI system must be given by a human. You think, well, what the hell did that mean? Actually, it says people must decide what the AI is going to do, right? The AI can't decide what the AI is going to do, because now you start getting into a different kind of a world. And I think this becomes such a fundamental thing in terms of how we use artificial intelligence. Without human intelligence, artificial intelligence can be used to solve all kinds of things that maybe we didn't want to solve for. And I think as SAP go on this journey of artificial intelligence, this is an important principle, but we also want customers feeding this back to us. And I'll show you some of the use cases you can decide if it's useful to you. There was one other one that I wanted to tag just in this scenario, is that sometimes we want artificial intelligence to really make us more effective, right? But other times, like the example I used with my daughter's programming, we want this sort of human in the loop scenario. There's another kind of one which is called human on the loop, which essentially means the AI is going to decide I'm going to get an email, right, telling me what it decided. These are big decisions to make, right? Because if you invest in technology, if you invest in artificial intelligence, you want some return on that. That's typically your efficiency, whether you're using it to make more money or work 15 hours a week. You want the return, but you do need to think very carefully, where is my human supervision, right? Is the human in every loop? Is the human on the loop? Or is the human just supervising the loop and those decisions are made? And so often, we want young people to come in as the data scientists and automate our businesses. And actually, I think those young people need some guidance from more experienced people. So that's kind of been the first principle for SAP. The next one is addressing bias and discrimination. I've touched on this. Actually, an algorithm that fails to recognize your afro might be an irritation, but it doesn't actually discriminate against you. I think we've all seen these cases where algorithms are implemented in such a way that they actually are discriminatory because they're built by middle-aged white guys like me and implemented by middle-aged white guys. And guess who we get to train that algorithm? we get young white guys to do it, right? And it's not the best idea. So I think as we go down the journey of artificial intelligence, we really need to look at these things. Where could we be introducing bias? Because there are many ways that we can introduce bias into the systems, and there are many ways we can remove it. So I think this is an absolutely important thing for us. Then the next one, and I think this is just about impossible, is transparency and whether we explain what the AI does. I said I started working with computers 40 years ago. In that time, I've written programs in many different languages, mostly of a fairly low quality. But I know how computers work. I have enough of a mathematical background that I can understand basic statistics. Many years ago, I passed calculus at university. Wouldn't pass it today, but it's been so interesting for me as I started researching this in a bit more detail that I cannot understand 95% of what these algorithms do. Just a very simple thing like what they call k-means. K-means is a way to cluster things together. It's kind of the basis of that. Of the first piece of figuring out who's going to get the recommendation of which movie. And if you don't do the maths every day and you try to understand what k-means does, really, really tough. But I think we have to make an effort, and I do believe that falls to us, the people in the business community, the people who are delivering IT systems, to hold our young kids who are so clever to account. They've got to write it down for us. I can't do it, right? If you come buy AI from me, I'll sell you tons of it, right? But I will not be able to explain to you how it does it. And I really think it's so important that if we are to have trust in what we're doing as businesses, as organizations, as part of the government, as SAP, we have to be able to explain what these algorithms are doing. And then I guess the last one is coming back to that idea of working 15 hours a week. We need to be aware of what artificial intelligence, the fact that we are taking 20 years of effort invested in an SAP system and using it to train the machine, teaching the machine to do the work that our people have done. What is the impact of that on society? Are we actually going to end up with less jobs? I think many people worry about this without having a thought about how they can influence it. And I think each time we put in an AI use case, we should actually be clear what is our objective. We shouldn't just do it. Because if we do start doing this, we're going to lose the support of society in general, right? Both this inability to explain how it is that my bank sent me that message, which was generated by the AI, and secondly, the inability to explain what this means for society at large, and whether I'm actually going to have less work. If we can't explain these things, people are going to tell us to take these systems out. And the one thing that I have a serious concern with for us in Africa, we desperately need more jobs for young people, right? I think we all know this, right? Youth unemployment is just at a level of crisis. But at the same time, if we ignore artificial intelligence, if we ignore the opportunities, we lose competitiveness. So we really need to be thinking about how we can use young people in this ecosystem rather than outside of it. I've thought about it. It's not an SAP thought. It's just a thing in my head. There are an enormous number of bright young people in this country who are unemployed, who speak English well and can operate a computer. And we could be using those people to train machine learning for people in other countries. Right? I don't see why we couldn't. I've had some really cool business ideas. Come talk to me if you've got a couple of million. We can do a startup, right? Anybody? Probably we need 10, right? So if you've got less than 10, we're not talking, right? This is going to be expensive. Machine learning needs calculation. It's not cheap. But I really think we could use the people in this country to do that effort to train the artificial intelligence, to train the machine learning for people from all over the world. And I think absolutely we probably have an opportunity there, but we have to think about how to exploit it. Because if we don't, we run the risk of either just going with everybody else, automating the hell out of everything and having no work, or on the other side, getting regulatory and legislative pushback, and we end up not being able to deploy these things. Ultimately, we become a less competitive economy. And I'm not talking about South Africa, right? I'm really thinking about the whole of Africa. Everybody I can sell computer systems to. So that was kind of like the tough part of my talk. Everybody came to be inspired, right? I told you Timo is the guy who's going to inspire. I'm giving the tough part of artificial intelligence. Timo's talk after mine, that's really inspiring. I did want to talk about something that was a little bit maybe more inspiring than governance. So this is something that we've started into S/4HANA Extended Warehouse Management. And by the way, this is available today. So what I'm talking about is now not a future, it's not a future thing. You can actually have it, right? So it's available. By the way, you have to upgrade to S/4HANA 2022. Anybody on S/4HANA 2022? Oh, come on, guys. Got to get in the cloud, right? That's where the innovation is. You've got to get in the cloud. No, I mean, it's tough to get to S/4HANA 2022. I realize that, but you can't have this in 2021. So EWM, what they've built is what they're calling an intelligent slotting capability. Now, when I thought about this, when I first read about this use case, I thought, hell, we've been doing this for so long. Why would we want the computer to take over this job of optimizing where we put the stuff on the racks in the warehouse? Because we've got so many people who are so good at this. Then I had a look at how they did it and what they said, and their goal is to make the implementation quicker, right? So to get the EWM system in, if you bring in new goods, if there's changes, to make the setup faster. And then I thought, but maybe this is a good one, right? Maybe this is a good use case for artificial intelligence, because ultimately we make the warehouse more efficient, right? That's ultimately what the goal is here, by empowering the people who run the systems. So I kind of like this one. It kind of passed all my tests, right? Except the one about understanding the algorithm. I was going to put it up in the little corner there. You'll see it stays blank. I could not explain the algorithm. But I did think that there were some things that we should think about, because this thing illustrates the very first thing about the machine learning world, piece of artificial intelligence. I don't know whether you can see the diagram, but what they're actually saying is that's your SAP system, right? That's the data in the SAP system. And we take it out of the SAP system, we put it through this machine learning model, and the output of that is an update on the master data, which is fantastic. But this thing doesn't solve this problem on its own, right? Every time there's a change in demand, every time there's a change in product data, you have to run it and train the model again. So the very first thing is perhaps instead of, while making the warehouse more efficient, we've actually created a new job for somebody to do. And that is, somebody's got to supervise how this machine learning inside my ERP system works. Probably not worth having a guy for this one use case. We are rolling these things out like, I mean, if you get to S/4HANA 2022, you can choose them off the menu, right? There's like 10 different AI use cases in the ERP, and next year that'll be 100. So this one was just an example. But I thought this was an interesting consideration, is do you need somebody to run this thing? And perhaps that's something you need to be thinking about even before you go and look on our website, right? If you want to adopt artificial intelligence, who's going to be in charge of that thing? I am actually in favor of somebody in the SAP COE, if you have one, or who uses an SAP system being in charge of it, and not some theoretical data science guy we hired off the street who has 4 degrees in statistics and has no idea of how the business runs. I'm really in favor of having people who've been engaged with the business for a long time to do this. You thought I was going to make the rest of the use cases easier. I'm not. They're going to get harder from here. So the next one was procurement. And I think many people have seen this, right, is that inside guided buying today, any Ariba customers? Who uses Ariba? Come on, 3 of you. No. Oh, there's some hands at the back. I couldn't see them. Okay, good stuff. Inside guided buying, we now build a recommendation algorithm, right? Sounds familiar? Netflix at the beginning? It's the same thing, right? This is Netflix for your corporate laptop. This is actually an amazing thing to have, if you think about it. Like on my team, everybody now has a Lenovo X1 with 16 gigabytes of RAM. But they've bought the biggest load of rubbish, which I pressed the approve button for, by the way. They've bought more expensive and less expensive. They've bought Macs. Some of them have had to keep those Macs for 2 years, and they couldn't use them, and they were not productive, and I shouted at them. Now, everybody has a Lenovo X1. What the algorithm would have done for us is it would have let us learn from people who do business technology, platform, pre-sales work across the world. This is the laptop that everybody buys. It would have had that Mac as a second recommendation, right? There's always somebody who wants a Mac. But for the average guy, they would have ended up with our Lenovo. So it really improves the buying experience. Something that's actually fantastic for an SAP customer, and if you have enough data. So what would you consider about a data set like this? So this one, I still couldn't understand the algorithm, but I could at least understand what the master data was. I was the master data guy for a long time, so and one of the things about the master data for this, the standard algorithm include things that are important to you. And the first thing I thought was, if I start recommending stuff, how does the algorithm know whether I am buying from a vendor who is a level 1 triple BEE contributor or a level 9 triple BEE contributor? The standard algorithm that we ship in doesn't know that. It does not have a way to add that into the master data that we feed into the system. So we need to go and modify it. Coming back to my thought that maybe you should put a business person in charge of AI, right? Because if you put a data scientist, a kid with 3 degrees in charge, they won't get to that until you are well past it. I think I've got 3 minutes. It's typical of me. I wanted to touch on this last one, and then I'll open for questions. Hopefully you won't ask me anything, because I've pretty much exhausted my knowledge. It's also why I'm trying to talk till the last minute. But I love this one. So we spoke about generative. I think everybody's talking about ChatGPT. If you haven't tried it, I would really encourage you to get your wife to open a profile. So this one's really interesting for me. This is a job description generated by essentially ChatGPT, right? Generative AI, large language model, generated and embedded into SuccessFactors. So this sounds really attractive in many, many ways, right? I know how much time I have spent trying to craft a job description when I'm trying to hire somebody, and maybe I don't like the standard corporate one. And then I still get like, I don't know whether you guys are the people for these jobs at SAP, but gee, I get some weird applications, right? GRC, apply for a job in BI. And there's, I don't know. It's really, I'm keen to have 15 years of GRC experience, but not in my BI team. So this is a really interesting thought, and I think it could be very, very save a lot of time for managers. And hiring managers, when you are a hiring manager, when you get the headcount, you want to get it done, but it is a time-consuming job. There were some things, though, that got stuck in my head, right? Saving time is perfectly, it's great, fantastic. There's no hiring manager who ever has enough time to do it properly. But one of the things that I thought was, is the language that it uses accessible enough? Will ChatGPT write the thing in a way that a South African, one of those young South Africans who's unemployed, can actually recognize that this is an opportunity for them? Or is it going to use a bunch of really fancy-sounding words, and it's not an accessible job, whereas in fact the person I want to hire could apply if I took the time? And then the last point I want to make before I skip my last slide and see if we can do a question is what about safety and legal requirements? Because ChatGPT could generate a beautiful job description. But if your guy requires a safety certificate to operate the mine, and ChatGPT doesn't put that thing on there, I should really not call it ChatGPT, because we've got to call it large, because they're not responsible for all bad things, right? It's actually just the algorithm. But if you have a safety requirement and that thing is not met, and hiring managers are busy people, if you skip that over, you've advertised the position, you could even appoint somebody before you realized that actually this person doesn't have the certificate that they need to do this job. And maybe it's not just a question of they can't do the job, but they actually are putting people's safety at risk. So I thought these are really, really interesting questions. The other thing I thought was that if you let ChatGPT write the job description, would it really put in requires 65 hours a week, right? Because, I don't know, maybe it would put in the truth, right? And that would also not help you to hire the right person that you were looking for. That's pretty much my entire story for this afternoon. I think I am pretty much on time for my 35 minutes. I had one last thought, which I will just put up just in case anybody wants to talk about it, which was about making this practical in Africa and in South Africa in particular. But any questions, any thoughts, anything anybody wants to share? Everybody in the previous audience was brave enough to ask questions of the global. Maybe the global executives are more accessible. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what is the underlying chips in that AI?
In which one?
From the SAP point of view.
Oh, that's really interesting. I like those technical things. They're much easier to answer. So, from a general point of view, when we embed AI into the ERP system, it typically tends to be more of the sort of statistical predictive stuff. And actually, most of that runs on the HANA box. The HANA system has a PAL and an APL. So the PAL is a predictive analytics library. The APL is a thing called automated predictive. And the HANA system runs almost all of that. What we've come up with, though, in general, and I think this is, so I pinched the 3 use cases I spoke about from the Sapphire announcements. There were 15 announced. It's almost impossible today to be the leader in the next algorithm development in artificial intelligence. So we've come up with a way to partner with just about anybody else, right? So in some areas we're partnering with IBM, with Watson. In other areas we're partnering with Google. In other areas we're partnering with Microsoft, particularly around the ChatGPT piece, right? So we actually take the tech that's in the business technology platform and we offload the machine learning into a Microsoft-provided implementation of ChatGPT. So it differs kind of across the board. Really an interesting thing, this. If you wondered about the algorithms and being competitive, go onto Google and Google, we have no moat. It's an article written by Google explaining that being a leader in AI is no longer a competitive differentiator. So it's a really, really interesting article. Anybody else at the back? No, they just moved their hand without. It's like bidding at an auction. No more questions?
I'm interested in the point about the loop on the loop and AI systems. The goal is for them to eventually make decisions. And how do you think about the boundary between making the decision and accountability?
Yeah, I think this is that's an interesting thought. I think the person doesn't have agency, right? Machine cannot actually make a decision. Agency is a thing that is unique to people, because what we're really talking about is the ability to make moral. And for me, I managed to not break it. Thank you, sir. I managed to not break it for nearly the whole thing. So, yeah, Daryl, I think it needs an enormous amount of thought, right? I think you've got to pick a person, put them in charge, and they've got to go and research this thing. I don't think it's something that we can answer. I am really over time. Please, if anybody wants to talk about anything, I'll be around. But, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.